And we also have policy on overnight athletic events, attachment 62340. Garth and I had a conversation about this week. Garth, you can elaborate what happened. And
so, Kim, I'm not sure we need change to this policy. That's why we're having the discussion. But it came about because we had incredibly 13 wrestlers qualify to go to the state tournament, which is an overnight event. And we talk about the fact that if it's an overnight or out-of-state event, that there needs to be board approval. So I checked with other schools to say, well, what are you guys doing with this? And showed Corey in my text that nobody has their board approval those overnight competitions that take place inside of Michigan. So when you look at the wording of this policy, underneath there's A, B, C, D, and E, and then it says, for purposes of this policy, a field trip shall be defined as any planned journey by one or more students away from district premises, which is under the supervision of a professional staff member and is an integral part of a course of study. And then it says, other district-sponsored trips shall be defined as any planned student travel activity which is approved as part of the district's total education program. So I don't know that athletics fits that at all. I mean, it could, if you wanted to stretch it out and say athletics is a part of the educational program, but I don't know that it has to. And from what I'm hearing from other schools, they don't, most of them told me that if it's in the state of Michigan, even though it's overnight, if it's for a competition, so if it's athletics, if it's the equestrian club, which I know is athletics, but equestrian club, if it's Science Olympiad, if it's robotics, if they're traveling overnight in the state of Michigan, their board doesn't approve it. Only if the overnight trip takes them outside of the state of Michigan, or if it's a day trip to Chicago. Right. So if it's out of state, or if it's out of state and overnight, the board approves it. And so I just wanted to hear from the board, you know, because it's hard, the timing of it can be so challenging.
so in this case, we've set precedents, right? This has probably been around since 2018. And we've been doing these events and approving them without board approval during that time.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to change that. I'd like you to change that policy to read that the superintendent can approve in-state sporting events that last overnight. And then outside of that, then that would come back to the board. And then we would vote on that language that you come up with in there.
Are your thoughts to limit that to sporting events?
So, yes, because the athletics, everything else would be covered underneath the educational. So like the robotics teams or Science Olympiad or anything like that would fall underneath that designation of educational.
And typically, Garth, we have all those dates well in advance, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yep. Yeah, so like we've never approved our wrestlers going to state, and I think we've always got individuals going to state. Never 13, which is awesome. Right. But we've always had individuals going to state, and we haven't approved that. But our wrestling team has gone on that retreat to Iowa, to the Dan Gable, and we've always approved that because it's out of state.
Out of state,
so
correct.
I think that would be the distinction. This is a competition versus, if an athletic group were to, if our softball team were to go to, down south, Gulf Shores, sometimes they've done that over spring break, right? They go down to have a week of training in positive way. We would approve that because it's not really competition, it's training. So.
And are we limiting this to changing just for in-state, or are we still approving out-of-state?
In-state. This would just be in-state. Yeah, board would have to approve out-of-state travel.
This must get really interesting for those schools that are right down on like the Michigan, Ohio, and Michigan, Indiana border, because I know they compete across state lines, so I wonder how they handle that. We don't have to worry about it, though.
All right, we are on to next item on the list is our superintendent's comments. First line item is our bullying and discipline reports.
Yep, so we sent those to you. I think they're pretty typical for this time of year. I am concerned about some of the bullying. We seem to have some more targeted bullying activities. Our buildings are working on our PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. I know both the middle school and high school are working hard on that, and MTSS, trying to address those pieces. Other than that, the discipline seems pretty typical for this time of year. Middle school's up a little bit, but along with their discipline, they've included attendance and tardy incidents, is what I'm looking for in that, and so that's why theirs is a little higher. But overall, there was nothing that stood out to me, except the fact, like I said, we had about 6 or 7 incidents of bullying at the middle school, which is pretty high.
Does every incident how does it end up on this report? Like, how bad does it have to be to get here?
The discipline report, you get what's called all the ODRs. So anything that's an office referral, the office discipline referral, you get all those. So it doesn't have to be, so like I said, tardies could be on there, disruptive behavior in class could be on there. The bullying report is all behavior that is repeated in nature, targeted towards individuals. So really, you're getting all of it. You're either getting the bullying, the separate bullying incidents, but on the discipline report, you're getting all discipline.
So how does it get there? Who reports that? Is it the teacher?
Our building administrators do that. So they put that together and they draw it from the system that we enter all that discipline into.
Right, so they're there. How does the information get to them?
So an ODR is a form that typically gets filled out by the teacher and it gets sent to the administration, and then they follow up on that. Sometimes at the elementary level, the student goes down to the office with their ODR in their hand. And so that's how that information gets to the administrators. Either the student takes it with them, or it's referred to the teacher later, or for tardies, just our administrators do.
As far as the discipline, that's a judgment call on the teacher to do an ODR or not, correct? Or is it?
Yeah, if it's like a classroom behavior.
Something, okay.
Yeah.
And so then from those ODRs, we're pulling out the ones that are bullying. So like if one kid had one instance where they called a kid a name, it wouldn't necessarily make it to here. This is, like you said, repetitive. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yep.
understand.
Yep, repetitive and targeted, yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a definition of bullying and criteria, correct? It's not overly easy to, in my opinion, it's my personal opinion, it's not overly easy to get on, I think, a bullying report. It's definitely, I think it takes some work, and quite frankly, I think there's a lot of parents out there who would feel that their kids are being bullied, but it doesn't hit the standard of our definition. So
That's what prompted my question.
there's a lot of times where I think as a board, we really do need to understand that definition, and it probably wouldn't hurt our community to understand that definition either, because, there could be a lot of things happening that our teachers pick up that don't fit that criteria.
Yeah, so a little bit of what prompted me too, and I'm looking at some of the government statistics on bullying and things, and they're excessive, right? It's especially, and we know right now there's a huge influx of bullying all over the place, and it's saying 20% of kids age 10 or older are getting bullied, and I'm like, 20% are getting bullied, but we only have a few incidences on this report, so just trying to understand the mismatch, and I think that's what it comes from, is a definition. So by the time they make it to this bullying report, you were saying this is awful behavior. Got it.
Yep.
And I, to your point, I'm sure that a definition for us for bullying or a school system versus some other group is different.
It's
Just
different.
like one person's definition of obscene is different from another person's definition. So,
And as I talk to other superintendents, cyberbullying seems to be like more problematic in some districts than in other districts. So I don't know if, thankfully ours, we have our cyberbullying incidents, and there's some in that report, but I think that we haven't hit that as much as we have in other places.
And unfortunately, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm old enough to, I never had to, it's hard to make kind of decisions on that when you've never felt that pain and gone home to your safe place and continued to have bullying. So our kids are through a different type of life than we are.
I had a question, Garth, on the middle school, because they had a lot more cases. And they also mentioned that they were being more so strict with tardies. Is that why? Is that specifically why there were so many more?
That's a big part of it, yeah.
Okay.
That, and they also, I think Travis left, they also used to keep some discipline with special ed students separate, in a separate tracking system. And now we're bringing it all together so that it's part of our PBIS efforts to, you really want to look at what are your hot spots, what are your antecedents. So like if you're at ECC and you start to look at what your hot spots are, it's the playground, right? That's where most of the misbehavior happens. And so what we've tried to do is to move all those incidents into one reporting system so that we can get a more comprehensive idea of where is this taking place, when is it taking place, is it in the morning, is it at lunch, that sort of thing. So that's a big part of it at the middle school is tracking the attendance tardies. And it's ironic because in some respects, tardies have gone down there. They've seen some improvement. The total number of kids who are getting detention and suspension for tardies has gone down, but the incident of tardies, like more kids are getting 1 or 2, I guess. And so it's kind of counterintuitive, I think.
Move on to our benchmark data report. Mindy Westra.
And if you could pass these down, please. Nope. Tap, tap, tap. There you go.
Perfect. You all have a copy. For those of you here in the audience, we will be uploading this for a transparency page. So you're going to hear some data that you don't have in front of you, so that's difficult, so just know that it will be updated, and you'll be able to see it through our transparency page. So 98B is Public Act 144, and it requires local education agencies to establish academic goals expected to be achieved for this school year. The Michigan Department of Education encourages us to use existing goals within MyKIP, and our 2 goals that we will review today are in our MyKIP process, which is our continuous improvement process. So we are in alignment with what MDE expects. Also under section 98B states that no later than February 2023, which is what brings us here today, and again by the end of 2023 academic year, the district must present the following information for grades K-8. The results from benchmark assessments and local benchmark assessments administered, disaggregated by grade level, student demographics, and mode of instruction for each school K-8. Just as a reminder, for benchmark assessments, we use iReady for K-8 for language arts and math. So as you look through this information, the iReady is the benchmark assessment that we use. So as you flip to the next page, each page is a different building. So again, we are only required to report out K-8. And iReady, we only use at the high school for demographics of our English learners and our special education. So the report will stop at the end of 8th grade. We have 2 academic goals in MyKIP. One establishes that we will be at 85% proficiency on our benchmark assessments by 2023 in both language arts and math. And we are required to separate those out as 2 separate goals. So we have a language arts goal and a math goal. So if we're looking at the information for mid-year, we'll start with the ECC. So we are required for our little kindergarten kiddos to take an online benchmark assessment. So our goal at this time of year is that we have students that are at 60% or higher. So what that states to us is at this time of the year, and our elementary kiddos took this just before the holiday break. Our middle schoolers took it after the holiday break. So just to give you an idea of when this data was reported, we want them at least 60%. That 60% would mean they're on track or already at benchmark. And when we say benchmark, we're talking end of the year standards. So currently, all of our students in kindergarten under reading, 84% of our kindergartners, according to iReady, are either on benchmark or projected to be on benchmark by the end of the year, and then 71% of those kiddos in math. We have 3 subgroups that we break out. It's our economically disadvantaged. That would be your free and reduced kiddos for lunch, English learners, and students with IEPs. We also break it down by male and female, but we don't count those as subgroups in our disaggregation of data. Any questions on the ECC? I do not have my glasses on, so I feel like I need bifocals, so I apologize. If you turn to the next page, you'll see Evergreen statistics. Again, it's the same information from iReady, both for reading and math. All of our students, so in first, second, and third grade, according to our iReady, are on track or already at grade level in reading and 52% in math. On the bottom of the page, I did break that down for you by grade level so that you can see as our subgroups transfer up through grade levels, you can see cohorts for first, second, and third grade. 53% of our students in first grade are on track or at benchmark, while 47% are from math. Second grade, our English language arts scores are 58%, while our math scores are 54%. And for third grade, we have 76% of our students on track for language arts and 55% in math.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So when you are saying our goal is to be 60% by this time of the year, when we're seeing data where they're not, do we revamp our goals? How do we address that?
So we do not revamp our goals. So unfortunately, once your goal is in MyKIP, it's in MyKIP. But we actually just had a district improvement meeting today. So we're tracking activities towards progression of goals to determine, are we on track with our activities? So in this case, are we offering the necessary tier 2 and tier 3 supports for students who may be falling below grade level? So currently we have interventions K-5 in math and language arts that take place during the day. So they can receive a tier 1 in the classroom as your general education. Tier 2 would be small group or more in targeted attention. And then for those students who are not thriving under targeted tier 2, they get moved into small group for tier 3. So we do have that for language arts and math K-5. In addition, this year, we've started our Falcon Hour. We noticed that we still have a group of kiddos not growing, so we wanted to add additional support to them. And Falcon Hour runs every Tuesday and Thursday after school and is invite only based on students' benchmark assessments, and that's K-5. So that's such a great question. So what are we doing to ensure that we are targeting students who need additional supports to be successful?
For the, is it Falcon Hour?
Yes.
What percentage of individuals do we invite versus that accept that invitation?
Well, that's a great question. Not so great at the middle school, to be very honest. We were probably about 22%. And that's pretty intensive. That's teachers calling home. That's our math and reading specialists calling home. That's our administrators poking and prodding a little bit too, so we definitely want to continue to work on that. We will be extending Falcon Hour into our summer school programming, so we hope to really push that number over summer school as well. Elementary, we get a higher percentage. We're at about 86%. Where we do have a barrier is that we can only offer the number of interventions for which we're able to hire staff after school. So we maxed out based on the number of staff that we could hire for after school. We did max out the number of students participating, and we have about 95% attendance at the elementary. So we're seeing a great deal of success with that. It did start in November, so it is it's new for us, but our goal is that they will start with Falcon Hour right away in October next year after we do our first benchmark assessment. So we'll be able to continue with that as well. And then if you take a look at the next page, this is Oakwood, so our 4th and 5th grade students. So overall at Oakwood, 45% of our students are proficient or on track to be proficient in reading, while 42% are for math. Broken down by grades, 47% of our 4th graders are on track for reading, while 43% are on track for math. And then for our 5th grade students, that's 45% for reading and 41% for math. And very last will be our middle school. I do want to point out, middle school, this is the second year that they have taken the benchmark iReady assessments for math. Last year they only got, I think, 2 assessments in last year, so we've not had a full, oh my gosh, I can't talk tonight. We haven't had a full year of math benchmark assessments yet from the middle school, but by the end of this year, we will. iReady, they've been doing for 3 years at the middle school. So all students, 6-8, are grade levels, 51% for reading and 44% for math. Broken down by grade level, that's 47% reading for 6th grade and 52% math for 6th grade. 7th grade, we have 48% and 38% in math, and then 56% for reading and 43% for math. Based on these numbers, you will have seen over the last couple months, we put a posting up and extended our reading and math specialist to the middle school. So we have hired, and she actually started this week as a middle school math and reading specialist. We have math and reading specialist K-5, so now we have them K-8. So our goal is to really be able to target Tier 2 and Tier 3 at the middle school to support these subgroups. We have also hired an interventionist. This will be our first academic interventionist at the middle school, and she started about 3 weeks ago. So just examples of activities that we're putting in place to address the needs of our students who may be struggling and really trying to push the level of support and increase that for them as well.
And we have math and lit camps throughout the summer, correct? That's K through 5, or did we extend that?
That's K-8.
K through
It is
8.
K-8.
Okay, and just to clarify, we bus those children?
We sure do.
Okay.
Yes. And this year, we're actually meeting already. Adam Wurst will be our summer school coordinator again, which is fantastic. If you know Adam, he's pretty amazing. And we're readjusting what that's going to look like. We're lengthening the time that we will have summer school. And instead of having a lit camp and a math camp, they will have math and literacy in the same day. So we're really extending the amount of opportunities for them to have support, and we're targeting those groups based on their benchmark assessments as well. So we'll have opportunities for targeted and intensive, and then enrichment still. That's a very important part of our summer school program is enrichment and rigorous opportunities for those students who are exceeding benchmark. So we want to ensure that we're hitting all of the needs of our students. So we're really hoping through a targeted approach for that, we'll start to see improvements too.
So, and kids don't need to be invited to that, correct?
They can volunteer, and we will personally invite. So we'll do both. So the conferences, we just had them. The first letter went out at conferences. So all students are invited, but then there are targeted students that teachers had personal conversations with parents and guardians about to try to probe them. And we have another meeting on Friday to say who hasn't signed up that we really need to come. And then our academic coaches, both elementary and secondary, will make personal phone calls for those kiddos. But transportation is included. They get a snack as well.
Is lunch provided?
Lunch, they're done in time for lunch. So they've tried to do lunch in the past. We're not doing lunch this year, but I'm not saying it's off the table.
Okay.
So we'll see how this is, since we are changing it to be 3 hours a day. We'll see how this year goes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Oh, is somebody timing me? Am I done? That's okay, I can be done. Awesome. And for everybody else, I'll have this up on the website for you to take a look at.
Thanks, Mindy.
Thanks, Mindy. And this portion is the supplemental law firm options that Garth has provided in attachment 8. So this, again, was for our provider for bonds and elections. And we will be looking at these 3 that you've provided. As far as the bonds and elections portion of it, in the information you sent out, Garth, it was a little bit unclear of how that would work as far as a retainer versus hourly. What type of pay schedule does that look like?
So Clark Hill and Miller Johnson do not have retainer options for things like elections or bonding. Miller Johnson doesn't do retainers at all. Clark Hill has a retainer, but it's only for their special education division. I guess call it a division. And then Troon does have the retainer option, which also includes other services. In terms of pay schedule, they seem to be fairly comparable. I do think Miller Johnson's a little pricier, and from what I've heard from other districts, they tend to be a little pricier.
So for something like bonds and elections, we wouldn't necessarily need a retainer for something like that, right? Like, we don't need to get to the top of the line.
No, not just if that's all that we're using these folks for, no, you wouldn't. The only reason a bond and retainer with Troon would make sense is if we were still going to have them do like our administrative trainings we talked about, because they do a lot of webinars and get a big discount there. Their monthly law notes, their monthly law notes are good. There are a lot of times where I'll call Troon, have an 8 to 10 minute conversation, and we don't get billed for that because we're retainer clients. But no, I don't know that you would necessarily want a retainer if that's all you're using them for is bonds and elections.
And we've talked before about training and things of that nature. You do currently use Clark Hill. You currently use Miller Johnson for different types of training depending on what time of year it is and who's offering it. Is that correct?
Typically when I see those folks, like if we go to the Michigan Negotiators Conference, then they might have somebody from Miller Johnson there. I know, if we go to, if it's different workshops that are sponsored by other organizations that Miller Johnson and Clark Hill and even Troon sometimes show up at. Clark Hill and they all do some webinars. They all do some trainings, yeah.
And you've worked with all three of these in the past?
Yeah, I would say the one I worked with Luis is Miller Johnson. And we did some work with them, like I said, with some training and some personnel a few years ago. I've seen Miller Johnson's staff at quite a few workshops. Kind of funny, I've mentioned Lusk Albertson in the past and not realizing that actually Miller Johnson bought Lusk Albertson. So if you go with Miller Johnson, you get both. You get 2 for 1, I guess. Clark Hill, again, we worked with Clark Hill when I first got here. That's when Barb Ruga was still with Clark Hill, and she retired, and we haven't used them as much. But Jordan Bollinger, who provided the information for us, did do some work for us back in 2017, so we have worked with Clark Hill. And again, I've seen their folks, Sarah Rosen is, Kara Rosen, I think it is, has done a lot of trainings. So yeah, and then of course a lot with Troon, but worked with all 3 firms.
Okay.
And there are districts in the area that use all 3, not all 3 of them, but this one uses Miller, this one uses Clark Hill, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Garth, could you speak to the nature of why we're even having this conversation? Like, why is this a necessity for us to have supplemental law firm options?
Well, when the board made the decision to switch to common law, they were not able, there were certain things like the elections and bonding that's just not something that they have experience with. And so Troon had handled all those things. Troon has bonding and elections and special education and employment law and all that stuff. But Common had a little bit narrower, bag that they pull from. And so in talking with Dave Coleman, he just suggested, we don't really do bonding and elections, so you might want to.
And what about any of those other training options that you mentioned that some of the other law firms offer? Does Coleman offer any trainings in regards to, school policies, school staffing, administration, any of the other items that you would typically have a law firm that offers training to the school district?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I haven't seen them at any of the workshops, and I haven't seen them offer anything online.
I guess since we're not making any decisions on this tonight, I guess my question would be to our board, when we made this switch, I've gotten much more time and information on a secondary attorneys group than I did have on the first one. And I just feel like we're vetting this one so much more than we did the first time. And I'm having a tough time understanding why we have potentially 3 good options that are dedicated and have been dedicated to educational law versus one that
From my point of view, all of these lawyer firms are an option, and I think it's a good option for Allendale Gotcha.
Good evening. First, I'd like to start off by highlighting some great things around the district. Last week was A Night in Paris Sweetheart Dance, and I gotta say, it was an amazing time. The PTO did an amazing job. The volunteers and the PTO staff worked tirelessly to make it a success. And then also, coming up on the 11th is the Glow Night Party for the Mother-Son Dance. And if you're interested, they're still looking for volunteers. They'd love to have you. Also this past weekend was the ACDA National Honors Choir. APS was the only public school and the only middle school in the state of Michigan to have students selected to participate in this choir. Congratulations on an esteemed recognition to those students. Also, congratulations to the ECC and elementary students that have had their artwork selected to be part of the Michigan Art Education Association, it's a lot, Region 9 display. I personally think it's wonderful to see young artists recognized and celebrated every day. Also, on that note, the art fair is coming up. If you would like to get a preview of what's going to be participating, they want volunteers to help hang up artwork. Reach out to the art department to help do that. Also, I'd like to touch on a couple district issues briefly. As I had emailed the board before the last meeting, the decision on whether to remain or depart from MASB remains unresolved. I would like to encourage the board to stay vigilant in discussions with the public and see this matter resolved soon, as our membership ends in 4 short months. That's 4 more voting meetings only. The amount of resources and knowledge that we have lost with the departure would be extensive. The loss of access to SETSEG insurance pool would be very detrimental. MASB and SETSEG bylaws both directly state that membership to the MASB is a requirement for access to this policy. SETSEG covers worker compensation and liability coverage. This affects every single employee of the district and every single person that steps foot or participates in school district's activities or property. Please don't leave this up to hopes and good feelings that the MASB and SETSEG will work something out. Finally, I'd like to briefly touch on one of APS's own teachers and their family. Last December, 3rd grade teacher Mrs. Bentema's husband, I'm sure as a lot of people are aware, had a catastrophic accident. As a result of this, their family has a long road ahead of them, not only emotionally and physically, but very much financially as well. Mrs. Bentema has unfortunately found herself in somewhat of a gray area in the district in regards to being allotted LOA, banked PTO, or whatever you want to, how it's referred, in regards to donations from fellow staff members that have expressed a strong desire to see their family succeed through their current season of life. I would like to ask the board to, may I just finish this paragraph if you don't mind? I feel it's pertinent. I'd like to ask the board to consider ways in which the district could create a way for this to help their fellow staff.
Time. Thanks, Troy.
Please try and help Mrs. Bentema. Please. Look to the FMLA or something.
Next on the list is John Stelmach.
Good evening, I'm John Stelmach, Allendale resident, father of 2 in the schools right now. I'm going to pick up where Troy left off. I've been made aware about a request for shared pay time off for the APS staff. I don't know what the particulars are. I'm not in the union, I'm not up on the policies, but please look into it. Talk to your staff, talk to your teachers. How can we help this local Allendale family make ends meet where we can? They're part of the community. They're part of our family. Where can we help? Moving on to some really fun stuff. Thanks again to the PTO and all of the volunteers. It's completely volunteer run, for the amazing dance, the Sweetheart Dance. The event had over 400 people, and if you were able to make it, it ran very smoothly. Tons of fun. I love going to it with my daughter. Thank you very much for everything you've done. A few things I wanted to hit on from tonight's discussion. First, it was brought up for a more detailed agenda. Thank you for bringing that up. I left my agenda over there. None of these bullet points or details were on there. It would have been helpful to do some research. Speaking of transparency, there is a ton of discussion about this Coleman Group and constitutional law. When I do my research on this constitutional law and specifically the Coleman Group, what I find is they've set up anti-COVID guidelines. They've stood up for that. They supported the overturn of the 2020 election, among other things. Be transparent. Why are you going after that specific law firm? Pertaining to the Policy 3112 discussion, it sounds like the visual is a great idea. I can't wait to see it, as long as it's in conjunction with Policy 3112. I think it would have been a very helpful resource last year when the communication chain was obviously skipped and the art department was attacked at a board meeting. And knowing the appropriate paths weren't followed, I think this is a great resource and lessons learned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Next up, Ronnie Allen.
Ronnie Allen, Allendale. First off, I want to thank this board for your time. Please continue to do most of the work publicly. Secondly, I want to address some confusion about public comments at the last meeting. Ruth Crowe said in that meeting, I was recently informed that school officials stated that I wasn't welcome at school to help with programs